Assalamu alaikum students, welcome to TEFL and welcome to Exploring Language, right? Today we are going to start another section of our course. Which section, my dear students? Yes, Exploring Language. And before that, what did we do? Yes, we talked about exploring skills, right? And we tried to see how to teach essential skills of language. Remember that? You see? Which skills? Productive skills and receptive skills. So we had a detailed discussion on all those skills, and today we are gonna start what? Yes, how to explore language. And which areas of language? We will see the sound system, right? Vocabulary, the grammar, and if you find time, discourse. So as usual, what to do? Review of the last lecture. So what did we talk about in the last lecture? Remember that? Yes, talking about writing. So what is writing? I told you, an approach, the process, or the product, right? And then what else we talked about? Yes, that process needs what? Needs concentration. And what is process? Activities that you perform, observation. What else? Brainstorming. What else? You're focusing. What else? You're writing. See? So all that we talked about, that you see the process approach. We talked about this, the process approach, and we had a discussion, and it was a detailed discussion that what is the process writing and how can we improve the product, mean the outcome of that process, that is the writing. And we need to what? We need to put efforts, we need to work hard on the process, right? And once we work hard in the process, so definitely our product would be ideal, would be as per our requirements. So if you want your process to be successful, then what you need to do? Yes, you have to explore things, you have to focus, you have to practice writing, fine. And again, considering that this process is a cyclical approach, which means that yes, at any phase you can go back and redo your activity. So it is not hard and fast that once you have done with your invention techniques and you are at the last stage, when you are editing, you cannot do that. So we discussed that process. Again, it's a cyclical approach. Means, yeah, you can redo things. So we talked about that. And then, my dear students, yes, we talk about classroom techniques and tasks for writing. Yes, invention techniques. I mean what? Writing, revising, and again what? Proofreading. In invention technique, what did we talk about? Yes, brainstorming. Fine, you brainstorm. It can be done individually or we can do in groups. So in brainstorming, what do? We try to generate ideas. We try to generate as many ideas as we can, right? So that is what we do in brainstorming. And why we prefer brainstorming? Because, my dear students, that you see in brainstorming what happens? We are able to get ideas, fine. And once you have ideas, you can select the best ideas from that, right? So that's why from pool of ideas, it's really easy to get some ideas, right? So that's why the brainstorming is an approach. Again, we call it is one of the discussion procedures, discussion techniques that helps us find generating ideas. And incorporate organizations, they hold meetings, and at times we use brainstorming so that student would be able to in fact give ideas. The trainees, the employees would get ideas, and management would use those ideas to make decisions. So that we talked about brainstorming. And then we move on to writing, drafting. Drafting means you have to write. Don't try to be perfectionist. You focus on the development of ideas, right? So when you draft, you focus on the organization and ideas, right? So I mean, you don't try to focus on the grammar while drafting. So it is just a draft, fine. definitely the draft would go to your evaluator, or it would go to your peer. So then you will get feedback, and then in the light of that feedback, my dear students, what would you do? Yes, you would, revise it, revision. And I told you that, well, revision and correction, they are two things. When you correct, means you proofread, means you check mechanics, you check punctuation, you check grammar. But revising, yes, you redo that in the light of what? Evaluation, in the light of the feedback that you have from your instructor. Got it? Clear? That is what we talked about. And again, one very important thing, my dear students, well, that learning to write is more than creating a final drop. This is very important thing, that we need to learn how to write. This is important. That this learning, again, I will say the process. The learning process is very important. Fine. So again, if you improve your learning process, learning to write, so obviously your product would be as per your expectations. Fine, students. This is what we have to do. So let's start today. Yes, as per the commitment, we have to start exploring the language, right? Earlier we finished, a while from now we talked about, yes, what? Exploring skills, and all the 4 skills we explored: receptive and productive skills. And now we're moving on to the next section of your book by David Noonan, and from that we'll be talking about exploring what? Language. We'll try to cover as much as we can in this semester, right? So in this remaining lectures, we'll try to cover the sound system that we'll start today in this lecture, then vocabulary, of course, in the next lecture, and the grammar maybe in the 31st lecture, and then in the last lecture we will review all whatever we have talked about. Fine? So are you with me? Ready? Good. Right, students. So let's here start with this pronunciation. What do you know about pronunciation, my dear students? What is it? An idea? Of course, the way you pronounce sounds, okay, the way you articulate. All right, I'm sure you must have done the subject phonetics, so you have an idea, right, how to pronounce sounds. But here our perspective would be how to teach sound system, how to teach pronunciation to our students, because we are students of TEFL, right? We are learning how to improve, how to help learners in improving their pronunciation, or how to teach pronunciation, because we are teaching, right, the courses, the teaching of English as a foreign language. So we are teaching it as a foreign language. So we need to know that, of course, sound is very important, in fact, element of language, right? And if you see that, very important, the phonetics and phonology, the both, if you put together, pronunciation. Is that clear? So that's why today we are going to start this aspect, that is pronunciation. What is pronunciation? Yes, who would tell me? Right? Yes, pronunciation. What people think of pronunciation, my dear students? That sounds we make while speaking, yes, or the sounds we produce, mean production of sounds. All right, some people say that. Fine, that the way when we try to articulate mean articulators. We have articulators, you're all familiar with that. You have done articulatory phonetics as well. Fine, so these are, of course, mean your lips are there, your soft palate, your hard palate, your tongue, again, your pharynx, your vocal cords, right? Your, in fact, other apical, all these are what? Articulators. So we feel that pronunciation goes with production of sounds. The way speaker, in fact, fine, they speak, right? So again, when you say the native speaker's pronunciation pattern, yes, of course, it is accepted, right? Reflect what? Commonly expected, accepted speech pattern. Native speakers, of course. Like when you speak Urdu, for example, so they way speak because we are the native speaker of Urdu, in fact. So our, in fact, pronunciation would be accepted in what? In our speech communities. So, my dear students, of course, when we see the pronunciation in terms of speech production. So, we'll go to authority and we'll ask Longman Dictionary. Now what does Longman Dictionary says in fact? The Longman Dictionary says what? That see, the way sounds are perceived by the hearers. I gave you in red, yes, to have it, to have your more attention on it, that the Longman Dictionary of Applied Linguistics says what? The way sounds are perceived by the hearers, right? Who are the hearers? Are listeners. So there, see, like we talked about in reading, that it is meaning resides in the reader. So here, the way our listeners, our hearers perceive the sounds, that is what pronunciation, one definition of course. And then again, here is the focus is on the hearer in fact. What? On the listener. So my dear students, in fact, talk about this pronunciation. See, the way we pronounce words, phrases, sentences, right? So again, the way we pronounce, what happens? We in fact tell others who are we. When I speak, my speech, the way I pronounce words, the way I pronounce sentences, the way I fall stress on words, on sentences. So this in fact, my pronunciation tells others who am I, right? So where are, see, who am I, and where are, see, what is my, again, maybe my native language. Is that clear? So that's why of course when we say that, when I speak, I tell others about me, who am I, where are, you see, what is my native place. Fine. So that's why, you see, that's the people say that when you speak, you tell others about you. So a language teacher, of course, because we are a student of TEFL, so a language teacher, being a language teacher, being a student of TEFL, we need to know that variation is a central feature of English pronunciation. There is variety, right? So there are variation. We have Indian English, for example. Indian accent is there, American accent is there, British accent is there. So variation is what is an important feature of English pronunciation. Is that clear? So there are a variety. Example, you have Australian pronunciation is there, right? You have, I've talked about Indian pronunciation is there. So definitely variation is an important part of English pronunciation. Got it? Clear? So again, when we talk about the place of pronunciation, that in teaching, of course, right, what is the importance of pronunciation in teaching English as a foreign language? So what happened? These EFL and in fact ESL classroom has gone through periods of dramatic change, right? When we talk about this pronunciation, we have seen what changes, right? From, of course, mean that from different time we have observed this, you see, the change. Now what happened here, before we move on, you need to know what is accent and what is dialect. So simple, accent goes with your pronunciation, right? And dialect, my dear students, goes with your region. It also, it goes with your class also, right? So dialect, yes, again it's a variety of language. Accent, again it's a variety of language, right? Accent, of course, variety in pronunciation, right? And dialect also is a variety, but on the basis of the region, on the basis of your class. Is that clear? So that is dialect. So there are many dialects, of course, right? So this is, accent is what? More with the pronunciation. So my dear students, talk about this linguistics, right? There are, accent is given. Accent depends mostly on pronunciation of specific words or phrases, right? Accent is the manner in which different people pronounce words differently from each other, right? And a dialect is variation in the language itself, and not only the pronunciation. Dialect is a type of language that is derived from primary language also. I hope you understand. So let's talk about these three primary orientations. I told you earlier that this place of pronunciation, teaching in, of course, ESL or EFL has gone through, periods of dramatic change, has gone through different periods of dramatic change. Accent and dialect, of course, I thought you people forgot that, so I should just tell you again. Let's talk about these three, what orientations, right? So 1940 to 1950. Right? The point is, listen carefully and repeat what I say. Time is 1940 to 1950s. Repeat what I say. I hope you understand. This first orientation period, my dear students, depends on the learner's abilities to imitate the sounds. Repeat what I say. Listen carefully and repeat. Is that clear? So, this is what the slogan of this first phase, the first orientation, that was, did you know, 1940 to 1950s. There is imitation, right? The learner listens and he repeats. That is first orientation. So, my dear student, what happens in this first orientation? Reflecting the first orientation, the classroom procedures, what? Assume that learner with a good ear, because we saw that in this orientation, listen carefully what I say and repeat. It means you should listen carefully, you should have good ear. Only then you can repeat. Only then you can repeat what I say. If I say democracy is the best revenge, so first you have to listen. That democracy is the best revenge. You understand? This is the point. First, listen and repeat. Second, of course, in this orientation, that the problem with the learner, that definitely you see that how do we listen? Of course, language, for example, talking about English language, we listen through the filter of L1. So problem is that the learner differ in how effectively they are able to listen to and discern, recognize the sound system of a new language. When you come to know about, for example, English sounds, right? So yes, definitely you have a different language. So it was difficult for the listener to listen and to discern, to recognize sounds. That was the problem with the listeners. So what happens is, beginning, the learners hear the English sound system through what? Through the filter of their first language, I told you. Because yeah, definitely, you listen some English sounds, and how do you listen? Through the filter of your language, your native language, right? So this may need what? Training in how the sound system of their first language and English may differ in both obvious and subtle ways. I hope you understand. Clear? So this was me talking about the first orientation was there, that once you listen, 1940s to 1950 was the time, and you have to listen carefully and repeat. Fine, a lot of repetition was there, right? And for that you have to have good ear. Only then you can repeat what I say. But definitely it was not easy for the listener, for the learner to recognize sounds, because definitely, of course, when you listen, you can easily recognize those sounds which are common in your language. But if you have, if your different sounds are there, for example, if an Arabic speaker listen to per sound, so it would be difficult for him, because there's no pa in Arabic, right? So if sounds, for example, we have Urdu ta and then ta sound in English, so yes, point is there, we can easily assimilate. So that was the first orientation, 1940s to 1950s. Point was, listen carefully and repeat. This is the first, you can say the phase. Now, if we move on, the second orientation, 1960s to 1970s. Yes, students, are you with me? So, we're talking about how the place of pronunciation has changed, in fact, right? So, we talk about three phases, 1940 to 50s. Let's talk about listen carefully and repeat. Fine. And the next phase, second one, is from 1960 to 1970s. What happened? Let's analyze the sounds closely to figure out how to pronounce them more clearly. So here what the teacher did, teacher gave explicit presentations. I hope you understand. Teacher gave intensive practice with specific sounds. Which one? In this ways. Because let's recognize, let's analyze. And what happened? Again, keeping in mind learners' mental capability. Teachers, of course, again gave them charts. Teacher brought video, clips in fact. Right? Teacher gave them sound charts. And for the first time, this IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, of course, was given. I hope you understand. So teachers, in fact, instruction helped the students compare features of sound system, English, with their other native language as well. For the first time it happened that you see, once the students, in fact, start, learning these sounds, and the teachers, in fact, facilitated the students, so then they were able to compare features of L1 with L2. Then what happened? The teacher, in fact, introduced what I told you, the diagrams, the charts and videos and all that, right? And for the first time, this IPA system also was introduced. Clear? International Phonetic Association. This is one of my second orientation. In simple words, if I tell you that what happened in this phase, that you see, it was more, for example, you can say, it was more practical, where the learner came to know what are different sounds. The learner, in fact, saw articulators, right? The learner saw charts and the videos, right? So definitely from the earlier phase, this phase was better. This orientation was better than the previous one. Because see, look at here. Here, IPA 2005. Have a look on all those sounds, right? Then have a look, organs of articulation. You have done in your phonetics earlier. You have lips are there, alveolar ridge is there, a nasal cavity is there, you have palate is there, you have velum is there, right? Uvula is there, tip, tongue, of course the three parts of tongue are there, root, middle part and the tip, of course, epiglottis is there, vocal cords and glottis are there, right? So organs of articulations. Which orientation? 60s to 17s. Again, see, vowel systems. Right? You can have, of course, this tongue, of course, is there, and their vowel systems are given, of course. Look at here, vowels, diphthongs, and consonants. Again, short vowels, long vowels. Diphthongs, consonants, right? So, this was, my dear students, what? That second orientation. Right? So, today so far, we talk about what is pronunciation, important feature of language, right? So, we are talking about this feature in, of course, teaching perspective, that how we will be teaching this pronunciation, right? So, what we are talking about so far, different orientation. How this place of pronunciation has changed, has in fact seen different phases. First phase was the first orientation, we call it, 40s to 50s, 60s to 70s. Second one, the third one, 1980s and onwards. Till now, for example, this is what we call it, third orientation. What happens? Again, the approach, communicative and task-based language teaching. Right? CLT, communicative language teaching, and again TBLT, task-based language teaching. I hope you understand. So let's start using these sounds in activities. Right? So here for the first time, now we brought those sounds in our speech, right, in our activities. So let's talk. Let's use these sounds when we talk. You talk about plosive sounds, you talk about bilabial sounds, right? You talk about alveolar sounds. So let's talk about nasal sounds. Let's talk about mutton. Let's talk about cotton. Let's talk about, let's talk about what? Ourselves. See? So what is it? In communicative, right, language, use those sounds in what? In interaction. I hope you understand. So that was third orientation, and here brief explanation of how sounds are produced. Again, of course, the addition to it, that how they are produced. Fine, what is there? What manner of articulation? What is the place of articulation? But shifts quickly to interactive classroom activities. Sounds are produced, fine. In the previous orientation we saw that, well, we had charts, Fine, we talked about the tongue, we talked about the articulatives, fine. But here there was a shift also, sounds are produced, fine, but the shift take place to interactive classroom activities. I hope you understand. That are definitely controlled, guided and increasingly more, extemporaneous. Extempore, filbadi. ठीक बात है, समझ आ रही है आपको कि जो of course जो आपने sounds learn किए उनको अपनी speech पे लेके आए. Bring in your speech, right? That was of course this third orientation. And here teacher highlight importance of genuine communication. Right? Here what is genuine communication? That of course that you speak in a real situation. Fine? That is of course genuine communication. And also helping learners to use target language sounds and sound patterns as quickly and interactively. This was the third orientation. So the crux of third orientation is, my dear students, that whatever the sounds we learn, we need to put them in communication, right? So more of what practice, the sound patterns that you learn, the practice of those sounds in what? In communication. And of course in the real communication. The point was that if you have sounds and you don't practice them, it means you put them in isolation. No. Communicative language or task-based language, that whatever sounds you in fact, you learn to produce, right? And go to a situation and use those in a genuine communication. So again, focus was on CLT and use that. So for that, what can we do, my dear students? Classroom task activities are structured accordingly. Fine. That of course mean all these activities were, we talk about, designed accordingly, that you see, so that those sounds will be, we're talking about, will be used by the speakers, and then once they use those sound patterns, right, in genuine communication, in real communication, so then they would be, those sounds would become part of their language. So this was in fact third orientation we talk about so far. Now, my dear students, in fact, the next point is that you see the classroom activities, the classroom task, right? How the classroom should be, how activities should be designed, and how classroom tasks are structured for this particular purpose. Well, students, so we're talking about the third orientation. Now the point is that how can we put those sounds in practice? How can we use those sounds in our communication? So for that, what did we do in fact? That you see the classroom tasks were structured accordingly. In fact, activities were designed accordingly. So now we'll see that what happened. Teachers in fact listen in and he monitors that what in fact goes on there. In fact, when the student use the sounds in the target language in their genuine communication. So what is it? This process can be accompanied through 4-stage sequence. There are 4 steps are there, my dear students. First of all, and you see that a student struggles in a sound. So we need to identify that which sound the student struggles. He finds it hard to pronounce that sound. Fine. So first point is identify the sound. Clear? Now second, definitely once you have located a problem, you have seen that the student struggles in per sound, or it struggles in ter sound, or it struggles in fact j sound, or it struggle in sound or z sound. What to do? Definitely you need to fix the problem. How can you do that? Yes, find a real world context. This is important. That you want to overcome this problem, of course, and then in a real world context and real situation, right, that design activities in a real situation, and then see that of course whatever you, because you are listening in fact being the teacher, right? So see that, and of course whatever you have taught your students, will that work or not? The sounds is there. Now you talk about that how to pronounce this per sound, and see in the students now, listen in and see in the real context. For example, talk about blab off. So he was trying to find out this r sound. And what he did, that he visited, of course he went to a factory and he saw people, in fact, and he questioned people, and then the answers he recorded, that how many people use this r, or how many people don't use this r, for example, car and floor and all that. So first, identify the sounds problem. Second, find real world context of natural language use with many natural occurrences. Third one, design communication based classroom task of genuine language use that incorporate the identified sounds. Again, of course, in that situation, you need to create a situation so that people would be able to, assimilate that sound, assimilate that instruction that you have given to your student. And next one is develop at least 3 or 4 tasks that may be used to in fact recycle the focus for instruction. It doesn't mean that only one activity would help the student to overcome his per sound problem, right? So, or example, then you need to give different activities, for example, that in the beginning, for example, there is applausion, but if this per comes in the middle, then will it be plosive or not? Clear? Or it comes, example, stop. Here mean S-T-O-P, it comes at the end. So can we say stop? No? See? So stop, like school, for example, right? So that's what, my dear students, when you see a problem, when you see a sound, when the student struggles in the sound, like first, some people struggle in first sound, for example, they cannot pronounce first sound. Some learners struggle in per sound. Some struggle in inter sound. Again, it depends, like different, it depends on your language one. It depends on native language, in fact. So when you talk to the students, then you find out that where is the problem. Fine. And once being teacher of pronunciation, you realize that this is the sound where your learner struggles. The next thing is you have to find a real situation, of course, real context, and see that has he improved or not. So that's what the 4 phases are there to help your in fact learner overcome this pronunciation problems, right? So the classroom tasks are structures play a vital role, in fact, on what expression of meaning, while teachers listen in, monitor how well the sounds are doing, and teacher lends support, of course. In the layer situation, teacher lends supports. Clear, students? Fine. So this talking about this background to this teaching of pronunciation, my dear students, what the domain of the third orientation is expanded to give greater attention to other features of the sound system. It doesn't mean that the third generation only talks about a vowel sound and the consonant sound. Other, suprasegmental features were also given due importance in the third generation. For example, yes, stress, right, rhythm, fine, intonation. Again, these features were also given importance in the third orientation. In the second orientation, you see the production of sound, and of course, when charts were there, how many sounds are there, you see that. But in the third, again, there is an addition that we talked about, also the stress pattern, we talk about intonation and all that. I hope you understand. So, this is what mean the third generation. So dear students, we talk about how many orientations? 3, 1942, 50, 52, 60 in fact, remember that, and then 82 onwards. 3 orientations are there. Now, how to teach pronunciation? That's what we are here for. That again, you think it's easy to teach pronunciation? What do you think? No? What do you think? Yes? All right. It's debatable, my dear students. Really, it's again, being a teacher, of course, you try your level best to improve pronunciation of the students, and you feel that students have problems, of course. They have language one interferences there, right? And this, of course, there are other factors where the student cannot pronounce words correctly, in fact, right? Sometimes, it happens that, of course, in your childhood, your articulators develop, and whatever sounds are there in your L1, so your articulators develop accordingly. So sometimes you put every effort, but you cannot in fact pronounce some sounds, right? That because your articulators, I mean, now they cannot change at this age once you are adult, right? So in your childhood, those articulators, I mean, of course, development took place, and now they cannot change. That's why when you learn, of course, a new language, so and the new language have different sounds, for example, and if your articulators have not been developed as per the of course this new sounds, new language sounds, so obviously it will be difficult for you to pronounce those sounds. Is that clear, students? Yes. So you see, for teaching pronunciation, yes, it's a debatable thing. Some people say yes, it is not easy to teach pronunciation to adults, and some say yes, it can be done to in fact at the beginners. Of course, you can teach pronunciation to beginners, but it is not easy to teach pronunciation to adults. Again, yes, you can say, well, we cannot say that, of course, that with our teaching the learner would be, very good in pronunciation, but at least there would be change you will see in the learner. So dear students, what are the principles of what teaching? We can say teaching pronunciation. We have to see what are the principles of teaching pronunciation. Let's talk about these principles. Here, the first principle is foster intelligibility during pronunciation, spontaneous speech. Now, what is it? Intelligibility, in fact. Definitely, my dear students, when the speakers speak and when you teach pronunciation, you need to know that, well, whatever, your speaker are speaking, of course, they are trying to pronounce words. So the element of intelligibility should be there, in fact. Sometimes, yes, you help your students to improve pronunciation and they try to, but at times it happens that, you see, their intelligibility suffers. So that's why while teaching pronunciation, you need to know that, you see, the intelligibility is important, right? Yes, you put efforts, you try to articulate sounds well, but if you are not intelligible, then so that's useless, right, students? So that's why you need to foster, being deaf student, intelligibility, and of course teach in a personalized way of speaking. And you might have seen some people try to be artificial in their speech, right? So what happens that they cannot be intelligible. An artificial speech cannot be intelligible. So that's why you need to teach in a personalized way, and you need to focus on this area that your learner's intelligibility is not suffering. Is that clear? Important point. And then, yes, of course, you teach pronunciation in a spontaneous and natural way, right? Of course, you cannot be native speaker. Again, if you go back to ALM, where the method was introduced to have native-like proficiency in language, and you see, which is not easy, right? People try their hard, but they cannot be native-like speaker. Of course, they cannot speak like natives do. I hope you understand. So this is what that, you see, this is a principle for teaching pronunciation, that yes, you need to foster that intelligibility must not suffer. Is that clear? And then avoid eliciting sounds in isolation. Yes, of course, sounds in a speech are important. If you try to elicit sounds, of course, in chunks and parts, so that would be difficult. So this is first principle, my dear students, that foster intelligibility during spontaneous speech. Second principle is that keep effective consideration in mind. Again, affection from the word affection, affect and affection, right? So here means that peer pressure. Sometimes, students, they want to, but they don't pronounce words because the students, others make fun of them, right? So these things you need to keep in mind, that some students, they are reluctant to pronounce words because they know that, if everybody says democracy and if you try to say democracy, so yes, other would make fun of them. Other would think that you are wrong, for example, right? Nobody would accept you, right? Aristocracy, you say these are sometimes you come to know, pronunciation, of course, you come to know about correct pronunciation of a word, and you feel that, what majority says is a different way. I hope you understand. So there you need to keep effective consideration in mind, that of course if the sound is there, and you need to tell that, for example, if majority says suggestion, and you tell the people suggestion, so at times you need to be effective. In fact, you need to show effective consideration in mind, and while teaching pronunciation, yes, so you need to be effective, and you need to keep this in mind. Alright students, the third principle, what is it? First two principle, foster intelligibility. Second, of course, principle is, my dear student, what is it? Yes, you need to keep in mind what should we keep in mind? So come back, that keep effective consideration in mind, that there is a peer pressure in your students, right? There could be some problems. So while teaching pronunciation, you should care for all these things. Well, principles again, we are moving on. The third principle, avoid the teaching of individual sounds in isolation. If you teach only sounds, example, p, b, t, d, k, g, alright, fine, sounds are there. But if you teach the sounds, and if you don't teach them in connected speech, so again, students would not be able to, improve their pronunciation. It would be difficult for them. Clear? So what we need to do, the principle says that teach, this pronunciation, what? Avoid teaching individual pronunciation. What should we do? We should teach in what? In connected speech, right? Sounds in the context of words, phrases and sentences. Fine. And again, practice pronunciation in interactive tasks. Generally what happens that if you talk about the phonetics and how the student and the teacher teach that, initially they talk about only sound system, they talk about vowel, they talk about consonants, and at the end they move on to the stress level, they talk about elision and all that, weak forms and strong forms. But initially just they give you what the IPA chart is given, and then you come to know what are the what is place of articulation and what are the manners of articulation. Clear, students? So third principle is avoid teaching sounds in isolation, teach them in connected speech. Next principle, my dear student, is provide feedback on learner's progress. If you feel that your learner is progressing, he is improving his pronunciation, you need to give him feedback, right? So this is important, that when you give feedback, and your, of course, authentic feedback, yes, motivate the students. So feedback is important, right? And feedback also, you can, the feedback again, in another way, it guides the students. It motivates, it encourages the student that, well, he is doing a right job, of course. And if somebody is trying to, pronounce, trying to improve his pronunciation, if somebody is working on pronunciation, so you being the teacher should motivate him and should give him the feedback, yes, you are doing well and you need to work more on that. Initially some students, yes, they laugh at others, but again, you see, being the teacher, right, of this system of language, pronunciation, you should keep these in mind. And again, your management in the class is important, that you need to make clear that, well, we are here to improve our pronunciation, right? And some sounds you might, of course, be surprised to hear. It happens sometimes that you see, you come to know, of course, correct pronunciation, and you feel that, well, before that you were unable to pronounce these words. So this is important as far as pronunciation is concerned. So this was another principle. Now another principle is, my dear students, what is it? Learners in control of changes in pronunciation. This is very important point. Learner is responsible for improving his pronunciation. We are talking about learner-centered approach, my dear students. What is it? Learner-centered approach means that the learner is responsible. So again, if learner is not willing to improve his pronunciation, yes, teachers are helpless here. What teachers can do, being TEFL student, what we can do, we can guide our learner. We can just coach our learner, right? We can't play, for example, you are a coach of a team and you just guide them. You cannot go to the playground and you cannot hit sixers, right? So is the case that being teacher, being teacher on pronunciation, you can guide, you can talk about students' problem, right? But ultimately the student has to, the learner has to work, learner has to put efforts if he intends to improve his pronunciation. Is that clear, students? So this is what the principle is, that the learner is in control of changes in pronunciation. And that's, you can motivate, you can tell him, in fact, being the TEFL student, being the teacher in pronunciation, that yes, what else can we do, right? So, but again, your motivation can work. Your motivation can work, of course, but again, it depends on the learner, that he needs to change and he needs to realize the importance of pronunciation, and he needs to, of course, improve. And I would say again that yes, maximum learning is self-learning. In fact, if learner is willing to learn, yes, teachers are there to help him out. So this is another, you can say the course principle is there, that learner will make his own improvement if he wants to. Right, now these were the principles, students. Principles for what? See, teaching pronunciation. So I talk about how many principles? Learner is in control of change in pronunciation. If I go back, feedback, right? If I go back, well, teaching individual sounds, again, intelligibility, and what? Keep effective consideration. Now the next point is classroom techniques and tasks. What are these? Classroom techniques and tasks. Well, students, now what can we do in a class? What can be the classroom activities? So first activity is, my dear student, that openness to change. What does it mean? It means that yes, you should create an environment in the class that student would, in fact, would accept that, you see, they are going to improve their pronunciation, and they are ready to accept this change, right? And what can you do in this regard? Well, you can in fact let the students imitate, right, a native speaker, in fact, and some students do. In fact, you can encourage students for that, and you can ask students to mimic, right? You can ask students to imitate, and maybe in this way they can use their L1 as well, right? So in this way, these activities, once you bring in the class, so again there would be, yes, an environment for change, and students will be willing to accept the change, and they will be willing to work on their pronunciation. So again, it could be an activity to prepare students for this, for the change in their, for improvement in their pronunciation. So that is openness to change. Again, being TEFL student, being teacher of a foreign language, on this area particularly, yes, of course, this can be technique you can use in the class. You need to open. If students are trying to imitate, yes, do them, right? If they try, some students do, in fact, they try to speak like native speakers, right? So yes, you should encourage that activity in the class. So that is one, is openness to change. Next thing is contextualized minimal pairs, in fact. Like you can bring a chart in the class, right, where sound, for example, you have this word pan, right, P-A-N, right, here I mean the A sound, or there is, for example, pen, right, a sound, right, or there is ship, for example, and there is sheep. So in the context you can bring these minimal pairs, right? So here, or that is a heavy bat, or that's a heavy bat. See, heavy bat, you can bring a visual for that, or that is a heavy bat. Clear? So ship or sheep. Fine. So that's why when you have to talk about these minimal pairs, so you can bring on a chart, you can bring in fact a visual, fine, you can bring a slide on that if you have slides, or a transparency, you can bring that. So this is one of the oldest technique in teaching pronunciation, to teach students to distinguish between specifically designed sounds, stress pattern, or intonation. Is that clear? You understand? Okay, this one is what? Contextualize minimal pairs. Fine. What can you do? Yes, you can design activities, or you can bring material, you can bring in fact realia, fine, or you can in fact draw on your so you could write on the board, to give what differences wherever there are minor with change, or in fact phoneme, the meaning changes, right? So you need to discuss these things with the students, that mat, right, there's m, there's a and ta, and then of course met, m, t, met in fact, right? So then of course then the kit, k-i-t, kit, and then cat, right? Kit, k-i-t, kit, short vowel, and the cat, ka, ta, cat. So these are minimal pairs are there, kit, cat, right? And then mat and mat. I hope you understand. So these were some of the what we call them minimal pairs, and you can use them in contextualized minimal pairs. Fine. In a context you can talk about these minimal pairs. Fine. And there is of course gadget and props. What are gadgets, by the way? And instruments, you can bring that, right? So of course for yes, you can bring kazoos, right? You can bring a ball in the class, right? Talking about the stress, or a rubber. Fine. So these can be brought in the class to show that of course a ball you throw, a rubber, fine, or a kazoos, of course an instrument. I'll show you that. So these are what you can use, that rubber bands, ball that bounce easily. Kazoos may be used in pronunciation classrooms to call attention towards stress and sentence stress, rhythm patterns, and features of intonation. You can have a look, for example, photograph. See, stress on photo, photograph, right? See, shape is there, of course, and then total syllables 3 and stress syllable 1, photograph. Second one, photography, photographer. See, photo, there are 4 syllables, photographer, right? Stress on what? Stress syllables 2. So what? Photographer. And then photography. See, photo. See, and then photograph, photographic, photographic. So stress on 1, 2, and 3. In the first one, stress on 1, then second one, third one, see, photographic. There are 2 tables are stressed. So see, this chart, this table helps you out. Now move on, my dear students. Again, word stress. See what? Academic. Stress on second syllable, academic. You see, then what? Apologetic, right? So apologetic. There are 2 stress. Apologetic. Then you have economic. Fine. Stress level is there. Then explanation. Explanation. So this chart can be brought in the class, right? With deliberation, or environmental, right? Generosity, environmental. Then what? Phenomenology, methodological, right? So these are what mean. We can bring chart, and with this phonetic transcription they would help the students. Again, sentence pattern. You can see sentence stress. I ran on all the way to the station, right? I ran all the way to the station. See this dot, you can show that these words are stressed. Again, see, if I eat cake, I get fat. Fine. If I eat cake, I get fat. See, so cake, more stress. Cake, fat is of course, if I eat cake, I get fat. If I eat cake, I get fat. See? So this way sentence pattern is there. This is a kazoos, of course, that we can use, of course, in this pronunciation class. So moving on to techniques, my dear students. What is it? That slow motion speech. Democracy is the best revenge. Is that clear? See? So I am teaching you what? Pronunciation. We are discussing today what we are talking about. We are talking about pronunciation, right? Pronunciation is an important feature of language. Vocabulary is also another important feature of language. Grammar is also another important feature of language. Slow motion speech. What? Grammar. vocabulary, right? So then pronunciation, democracy, aristocracy, bureaucracy. See, slow motion speech. Fine, students. So again, tracking. What is it? You can have transcripts of this. You can have scripts. Scripts of these the movies, for example, like transcripts of any TV talks. You can have that. You can have written script also, and then you can use that also, right? How those sounds, like when you see the transcription of a script, fine, then you can see that which word has been stressed, which word has been unstressed, which was the strong form, which was the weak form, and all that. Clear? And even you can listen, of course, you can watch that to see, to compare also. You have a script in front of you and you can watch the same movie. So again, that would give you an idea, and then you can put that script aside and listen again. You would be able to find out. Again, students, of course, techniques from drama and theater, very important, of course. Again, it's authentic material you can use in a class, in fact, right? You can pick dramas, of course. So that again would help you. And there's a website you can have a look, that it is www.iscrip. So on your slide, you can use that for this particular purpose. So these were what? Classroom activities. Here again, now what to do? Yes, speaking in the classroom, right? Pronunciation in the classroom, dialogues. And there's a dialogue in front of you. You can see this dialogue. In fact, we are going out. There's contraction, going out for a drink later, right? Do you want to come? Fine. Sorry, I can't. I have already got plans. In fact, I'm meeting my mom for a dinner. In fact, so students, it's in fact a dialogue is there. In fact, so you can practice this dialogue. So how we can practice, in particularly the speech context, this pronunciation context. So you can analyze the dialogue, in fact. So in analyzing, you can find out that which are the stressed words, which are the unstressed words, which are the contracted words, which are the full forms, right? Where is question tag, right? And of course, where is the short form, where is the strong form, right? And then again, you can see what the vowel sounds. There are the vowel sounds, and focus on also the consonant sounds, right? So these are, once you analyze a dialogue in the class, you can keep this in mind, that what is the dialogue. In dialogue, you can see the stress pattern, right? The strong form, the weak forms, sentence pattern you can see, right? And you can come at the micro level. You can see the sounds, which sounds were there, which vowel sounds were there, and which consonant sounds were there, in fact. So this is what, in my dear students, today we talked about what important feature of this language, that is pronunciation. And we started with definition of pronunciation, and we refer to Longman's dictionary, and the dictionary emphasizes that it depends on the perception of the hearer, in fact, that how he perceives our sound. Like we say, it is just the art of producing. You produce sounds, production is there, but the point is, the Longman says that, well, it depends on the perceiver, it depends on the hearer, in fact, how he perceives your sound. And then we talked about that, of course, what is native speakers' pronunciation pattern, right? And they, of course, reflect commonly accepted speech communities. Is that clear? And then we refer to this this dictionary again, that what does this Longman dictionary says, and we saw, right, in our practice, right, that what is pronunciation, in fact. And then we talked about what, that you see, we talked about that when we talk, when we speak, what happens? See, we tell others, right? We, in fact, disclose ourselves to others, that who am I, right? So who am I? Fine. Where do I live? Fine. Because my speech speaks for me. My speech speaks for my region, right? That's why dialects are there, of course. Dialects are more what? With the region, with your class, right? So these are some things we talked about today, and then we also saw that the difference between accent and pronunciation, right? Accent and dialect, we saw that. So we'll talk about these three orientations from 1940 to 50, right? 50 to in fact 60, and then 82 onwards, we call it third orientation. So with this, students, in fact, it's time to say goodbye to you. In the next lecture, we'll talk about another feature of language, that would be, yes, vocabulary. So with this, I say goodbye to you. See you in the next class. Allah Hafiz.